Suzuki Ingerslev, production designer for Based on a True Story, which is based on the true crime phenomenon. So are you as into true crime podcasts as much as Ava on the show?
I actually in the beginning did listen to a few of them. I always liked the Crime Junkies, and I would always listen to that on the treadmill. But this is kind of a little bit different. It's almost like a satire on the crew crime of it all. So our showrunner based it on an experience that he had, and then went and embellished it a little bit further. And then you add Chris Messina and Kaylee Cuoco, and you've got like an amazing ensemble that makes it kind of a dark comedy.
Mhm. I love their house. It's this cute little like Spanish bungalow, and they start this podcast mostly because of their financial struggles. And I love how you could tell that they're just from like their living space, that they're like middle class, and they're not well off like their friends or the mansions that Ava, who's a real estate agent, is trying to sell. So how did you find that space, for their house? Like, is it just the exterior? What's the interior builds?
That was our big challenge. It took us 6 weeks to find that house. We went in different directions. We were threading a very fine needle. When you think about it, that's probably a $2 million house. And you're kind of pleading poverty to the point that you're going to want to do a podcast with a serial killer. So we kind of had to convince other people in the country that it's not the perfect house. They probably, bought it a long time ago. And the way we did that was having it be less than. The kitchen's not been remodeled. The bathrooms are the old tile. There's cracks in the walls. And even my decorator, he spent time finding some of the furniture that's kind of broken. So you don't get to do that very often. But it was subtle, but in juxtaposition to all her friends, as you said, that's how you really sell it. They have these uber mansions that, you can't even compete with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't have like state-of-the-art appliances, and their toilet breaks down. So
Exactly. That's how you got to sell it, because, it's like Spanish bungalows are tough. They're hard to make look bad. They always look good no matter what.
Mhm. So how did you go about, furnishing the interior of like finding these kind of, not completely brand new furniture, maybe like it's like, older style, maybe like hand-me-downs, like thrift shop type of stuff?
And, for the most part, that's what my decorator, Ron ViFranco, did. He went around and went to some thrift stores. But we also got some new stuff. I think keeping it kind of tone on tone and in the beige world and not making it too hip and cool kind of pointed us in that direction. But the other thing was that they're a young couple and they hang around wealthy people on the West Side. So they have some smattering of taste. Like, you can't make them look like, they're just thrift store people, because they wouldn't be. And we tried to bring in the like younger generation of it all with the plants in the house and kind of what's currently going on that doesn't cost a lot of money, but that, they could afford, and make it a little bit cozy, and a little bit tighter, like a little bit more claustrophobic in there.
Hmm. Yeah, and like Nathan, he teaches tennis at a very elite tennis club. It's not like the YMCA or anything, and he used to be a pro. So it's like they had some money, from his playing days.
Absolutely. And, the tennis of it all, he was like reliving his glory days all the time.
Hmm.
So you kind of want to bring that element into it too, where it's kind of sad. Like, I feel like tennis is kind of a metaphor for this whole thing. Like, he never planned what the next step in his life was going to be, right?
Yeah.
Once you give up what you love, you have to find that next direction. And I think he was kind of lost. And we kind of had that color code that the house would be desaturated, and it would kind of be kind of more about failure and stuck in a rut, that kind of feeling, while the tennis court on the other hand, and the houses like represented green and blues and money. Like, the courts were blue, you have gardens in the big houses that are all green, and it's kind of blue skies and money and ocean views. So we kind of had a little bit of a color palette going on.
Hmm. I love tennis, so I love his little shrine of his past trophies. And the apparently he won Wimbledon juniors in '97. So
That was
how
a
did you
tough
go
thing.
about like making those trophy props?
Oh my God, if I told you how long that took, that was very complicated, very specific. And we spent probably as much time on that trophy case wall than we did on building that entire house. We had to build and draw and light and furnish that entire house in 4 weeks because it took us so long to find the ideal house. And as you asked me earlier to go back, it was a location, and it was, not a perfect Spanish bungalow. We fixed it up a little bit and then built that on stage, and created our own interior. It was very specific because of all the action that needed to happen. But that trophy case, we spent as much time on that, and they wrote articles that were the real kind of articles. We went back and forth on what tournament could he have won, without being ridiculous.
I mean, he beat Federer at Indian Wells, man. So that was.
And the irony is that I'm an ex-tennis player as well, and I played throughout high school and all that, and I was supposed to play in college, and then I didn't. And so bringing back all that tennis stuff to me is that's my punishment.
But you never started a podcast with a serial killer, so.
No, I thought about it. No.
Well, going back to what you said about the colors, I love the color palette. Like you said, you use a lot of the greens and blues for the more affluent areas, and then they're more desaturated. And I also like the lack of red, unless Matt is in the picture or Death is in the picture.
Oh, good, you got on that. Yeah. So that was also our mandate, to kind of make it, when you see red, the red booths of the club, or all the red stuff that's going on, that's going to be an indication of the blood and the danger and violence. And we had fun with that.
One of the most fun episodes is Crime Con. So, and I know you guys didn't go to Vegas. It was in LA, right? You had to recreate booths and everything in a hotel. So how did that all come about?
So they wanted to go to Vegas, but we just didn't have that kind of money anymore. And so I reached out to Intercontinental Hotel. I've worked with them before, and they're lovely, and they really supported us. And all the venues we needed, which were at least 6 of them, we could do in one hotel. So it saved us a lot of money from moving hotel to hotel, the ballroom to this and that. So we kind of staged there for over a week. And we had the time to kind of, put up all the booths that we had to do. And that was not easy. There was no research on the real Crime Con. We missed it by a year. It was in Vegas the year before. It would have been fun to research it, but we could find no pictures on it. As deep as we dug, we couldn't find anything. So
there's no coverage of Crime Con? That's so weird.
No, we couldn't find it. It was so weird. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to just make it what we think it should be. And it's about, booze with serial killers. And they always try to sell the merch and the books and so we reached out to some vendors that we know, my decorator's friends with somebody that writes books. And so we were able to use all their books, and we had some fun with it. I mean, it was a very, very quick up and down, but I think it turned out really great. And by using that hotel, it felt very modern. And so you didn't have to do quite as much because you had such great walls and stuff behind you to help fill in the gaps.
So how many booths did you create for it?
I think we ended up with 18 of them.
So was it just kind of angling them in the right way to create depth to make it seem like it's covering bigger space than it actually is? Yeah. This is
my second or third prime or convention that I've had to do. So you kind of have to make a dead end in the booths, and you just have to shoot a little bit lower so that you believe, you put banners up high and you believe that the whole convention's going on. And then we came up with the idea to have a ballroom that was right next to it, have some screens, and it looks like the convention continues into that room. So it kind of gave it the scope and scale that we needed on a budget and in a very quick timeline. But it was fun to do all those. We did a what's your alibi board, and I made everybody on the show write on a Post-it note and put what their
I definitely paused to look at all the details.
Some people put the funniest things up. It was pretty hysterical. So it was kind of fun getting everybody involved in it too, which is always nice.
Well, lastly, it's been renewed for season 2. So have you started planning for that yet? There's a huge cliffhanger from season 1.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows what's really going to happen at this point because of the strike. So everybody's kind of, waiting to see if when that's coming back, if other things are coming back quicker. It's hard to know, with the strike. It's definitely been tricky, and I feel bad for a lot of people and prop houses and all that stuff. So I am hoping that we come back soon.
Yes, fingers crossed. Well, Suzuki, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Merje Veski. In season 2 of The Bear, they transform the beef into the bear. And you had to do the same as a production designer. So how did you approach that?
Well, we wanted to go with something what be up to Michelin standards from this old sandwich shop. And but it still has to remind like some of the old elements of the place.
Mm-hmm.
So looking around and doing a bunch of research, we decided that we're gonna save the old facade, and it's around in Chicago and all over the world, and then the rest of it we're gonna rebuild or knock walls down and put up new walls. So our big inspiration was a French Laundry, what's in California, and a Chicago restaurant called Ever, which is a Curtis Toffee restaurant. And so yeah, that was the beginning point. And the second thing what was very important was the lighting, working with a lighting designer, Andrew Werder, just to have it lit and ready to go, so they don't have to rig lights during it. So lighting was a big part of the entire kitchen design and the dining room design.
Mm-hmm. What kind of did the showrunners like Chris and Joanna have like specific ideas of what the final look of it would be, or is it just general ideas like what you just said of
No, it was Chris was very much loved the French Laundry. That was his favorite restaurant as it looks and feels, the simplicity of that. And also with Coco, food is the one what's gonna be the visual, the beauty in it. Everything else is very simple. It's about the food and not about the restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Well, is it exciting for you as a production designer to have to revamp the central set? You know, it's a completely different look from season 1.
Yes, it's very exciting. Anything new is very exciting. And also I knew that what Chris and Andrew had in mind, having again a one camera shot through entire episode or half of the episode. So how can the camera roll in and out from a kitchen to the dining room, the back of the house, back in the, so how can that be smooth? How can we design around it? Like putting the linear window between the kitchen and the dining room, so you can see through and you see the action. Yeah. But same time, Chris wanted to keep the kitchen action completely separate from the dining room, so the sounds wouldn't go through. So it's not an open concept, but it's still you can see the background.
Yeah, you can see the depth like through the window. Yeah, for sure. I love the season 2 because it chronicles them revamping the restaurant through like 12 weeks. So is that helpful when in the story the restaurant is also a work in progress for you to showcase the changes in every episode?
Yeah, yes, it was. And I don't know if people noticed it, but you can see in the old restaurant in the beef, we actually taped it out what the new restaurant will look like. So we're with the red tape or blue tarps and things like that, where we took the walls down and everything. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, this season also had some episodes that took place outside of the beef / the bear, like in Copenhagen, and then in Ever. You guys actually shot in Ever, and then episode 6, Fishes, the flashback episode at the Brizzato house. What was it like designing those episodes and working on those and creating the concept for those?
Well, Brazzato's house we knew it's going to be so much fun because the family is together and it's dysfunctional and it's crazy. And it's going to be over the top. We wanted to go add it all together into design but it's also in the characters. So that was fun. And then how do we put it in there that the mother will crash the car into the dining room in front of everybody? So just putting all of that together, that was shot between the set, what we built on the stage, and the actual location, and just trying to figure out how it all works together. It was fun and it was interesting, and have the feel that it's really claustrophobic and very small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in that episode, in the opening sequence, basically, like there's a very long scene in the kitchen and everyone's just coming through and it's chaotic and hectic. But the show also has a lot of close-ups too. So how do you guys go about like accommodating the space for, you know, the camera people to be up there and the cinematography up there to capture that?
Well, it's like, I think it's like usually working on a location, or you just move the furniture for the camera, or we did lots of rehearsals with camera to make sure that the furniture is in the right place, that the camera can move in and out and do what they need to be doing. Couple times set dressers will just move the pieces in and out while the camera moves, and so everybody can work.
Yeah. What about working in Ever when it was, you know, it's an operating restaurant? How did you guys go about shooting in there?
Ever is quite large inside and spacious, so we hardly moved anything.
Mm.
And again, camera just moved as needed. We hardly moved any tables or pieces. Filming there was very easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the third episode, Sydney, she basically eats her way through Chicago. She goes to a lot of restaurants. And like just in like 5 hours, I don't know how she does it, but what was it like picking those restaurants and working with those places and deciding where she would go throughout the day?
I think that was mostly Chris's ideas, and it was like what's popular or what people will recognize when it comes to Chicago, like some of the high-end places like Publican or Kasama, and then down to Cassia's, Pierogies, or Margie's Candies. Like this is it. That was about Chicago. Like you will know and you will recognize and you will absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm. How important is it for you guys, and you and your team, to like incorporate like Chicago brands even like in like the set and like the tools, like maybe like are you using like knives or anything specific on set just to give it more Chicago flavor?
We do have some Chicago designers who's are involved with this, like a furniture in a Bear restaurant. It was all Chicago made. Some of the books and stuff and smaller details, but it was very much like when we were exterior, again, going back to the visiting all those restaurants, it's like, this is Chicago, it's the flavor, and that's what it looks like, and the train and the weather, could be very cold and gloomy sometimes. That was the main thing, but people always will know about it.
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite shots in the finale is the fight between Richie and Carmy when Carmy's locked in the fridge, and just like the juxtaposition and then the wall in between the fridge door. So what was it like designing the fridge and like that whole space just for that scene?
Well, we designed the entire restaurant, and in the middle of the filming, we were already half through the season. The director had this idea to do the split screen, but instead of doing the aftermath split screen, let's cut the restaurant, or let's cut the cooler open. And that's what we did. That was the last thing we filmed, so we were able to actually cut that wall open, and so it's in real time. They are both, it was filmed with a one camera shot. We see both of them on the other side.
Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was fun, and if we were able to do it, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, obviously, you know, the lot of things unclear at the moment, but like any ideas for season 3 yet? You know, now the restaurant is open.
Well, I feel like season 1 was all about the restaurant craziness, and season 2 we introduced more of the characters and went deeper, like who is who and what are they outside. Yes, now we have a new restaurant, and if season 3 will come back, then probably it's gonna be mostly in the new restaurant, but I'm sure there's gonna be more character development as well.
Well, can't wait to see it whenever it comes back. Merje, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Grace Yoon, production designer on Beef. I know Lee Sung-jin reached out to you about joining the show. So how did he pitch Beef to you?
Oh, he he had this like I wish I could remember, but it was this crazy percentile formula of different shows that he really admired. I think The Sopranos was in there. I think Punch Drunk Love was in there. It just shows that, and a bit of Koreeda. references, and obviously those are things, I love, and felt like, wow, that's incredibly ambitious, but if it's something, I want to be a part of. And he told me about the creative team that was already involved, and I felt like this seems like something really special. And then when we started continuing with the email exchange, I felt like he had such wonderfully specific, thoughtful ideas about the characters and their trajectory. And I felt that I just wanted to help him with his vision.
Danny's and Amy's homes are so important, and also they just illustrate like the duality of their characters and their struggles and their personalities, and I feel like they're also like a physical manifestation of their like psychological state. Like they're both trapped in their homes, but in completely different ways. So I guess let's start with Amy's house, because like I know you guys have talked about like designing it as a cage, and there's slats and everything, and there's like a restricted view, but it's also very minimalistic, and it's so curated, and it feels kind of performative because she's so successful with her business, and she feels like she needs to be that way in her home life too. So what was your approach for her?
I think at first, Sunny and I had discussions about Amy's character and how she was, like you said, she's constructed this outward persona and life for herself, thinking that if she builds it, she will find some sort of inner peace or happiness, And I think her character, as well as Danny's character, they like fall into that trap of thinking that the American dream and success is going to bring some sort of sense of fulfillment, but they're actually quite different. They're just different types of the human condition. So with Amy, we wanted to display that she is successful, and she's very, very calculated in some ways, and how she wants to present her life to the outside world, and also like create it for herself too, with the family life, and then her home and her business. And so we wanted to convey the sense of control in the way she designed her house, using a lot of rectilinear lines, but then also a sense of like the influence of her husband's heritage, bringing in like a Japanese style, like influences, mid-century influences, kind of the Scandinavian Japanese mixture of those things. So, and this idea of a cage having at least the first floor of the house, all the rooms flowing into each other, making it feel like an open plan, but not necessarily feeling that way, because there's no big picture window that looks out into the yard or the sky or anything, so it feels quite cold and enclosed.
I think you really kind of see that also in Junie's bedroom, because I kind of laughed when I saw her bed, because it's this like very boxy bed, and there's no soft edges. It doesn't look very comfortable. But it kind of just feels like this is totally something that Amy would get for her child, because she needs that like control, and
the setup curator Kelly Jo, Tinney, and I were just thinking about like what is another representation of this cage, or like box, like she's boxing in her own child. So that's when we started thinking about what is the frame of a bed. That also plays into the aesthetics of minimalism in Scandinavian design.
Mm-hmm. Well, Danny is not as well off as she is, and you definitely see that in his apartment. It's a lot more cramped and messy, and then it's like unfinished like renovations, like the paint splatters on the wall and everything. So what was it like designing his place?
We had a lot of fun designing his place. I think the initial conversation I had with Sunny was that he felt like Danny apartment reminded him of his very first apartment in LA that was next to the train tracks, and furniture couldn't fit properly, and so we started to think of ideas of like, what would it be like for Danny if he had these physical obstructions in his own home, and where the clutter itself can feel oppressive because it's left over from unfinished projects, and also, you know, hopefully convey that that's something that he struggles with, being able to complete and finish something that he sets out to do, which is a struggle for his character.
I think you can also, like, I like that you can see the contrast in him, like, you know, obviously he wants to like build a house for his parents, but in his place he goes to see like the hand-me-downs and stuff. You know, it feels like generational, whereas with Amy's house, it's like the point is made that like her mother-in-law does not like the design. You know, it's like she doesn't want to please her mother-in-law with the design. So I like that the contrast there, where you could see like Danny still has this like connection to like the past. Yeah.
I think Danny has the shame of feeling like he's caused his parents to have to move back to Korea, and then he's adopted this idea of like scarcity mentality that a lot of you know, that's part of the immigrant experience of like holding on to something so long as it's still useful. So I think his world is a bit overwhelming with the stuff that he carries, like physical stuff and psychological burdens of that. And I think with Amy, her, I guess, drive is to escape her past, and like her family home, like the episode when she goes back, there's a lot of discomfort in that feeling for her character. So I think we wanted to see what Amy's character would do when she reaches a certain level of economic success, of like how she wants to break from that type of lifestyle she grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also see it with the Tamago chair, because it's like it should be like a family memento, right? Because her husband or her father-in-law made it, but it's in the show it's like used as like a commodity, like they can sell it, you know. And I know you guys made that too. So what was it like designing the chair with like the butt imprint?
I mean, it was really, I think I remember reading that line laughing out loud, that I love that little specific detail that Sunny put in there. Sunny did have this idea that he really wanted a three-legged chair. So, and then we started thinking about like this egg curvature shape that would work well with the curvature of, I guess, Fumi's butt outline. So, and this sense of that, like this seat is a lot heavier material than these dainty like three prongs that it's landing on. So I think it was important to do that, and also use a color that we don't necessarily see a lot in the show, which is at least not in like an object, but this like really vibrant green. And it kind of ties into how in George's own artwork of like these amorphous shapes of his father's influence flowing into that as well. But yeah, as a commodity, Amy doesn't care much for the chair as a priceless object. I think there's a lot of themes in the show about art being a commodity, and whether it's accessible to you depending on your economic social status. So it was fun thinking about all the artwork in the show in that way.
Mm-hmm. What happened to the chair? Where is it now?
What happened to it? Might be in Sunny's house, I think. Okay. In a crate somewhere.
The butt, it fits his butt, the print, it's fine.
It fits a lot of people's butts. While we were making it, a lot
you
of people sat on it Yeah, I tested it to make sure it was could bear the weight of a human being. So a lot of people tested it.
Well, great. So it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Arwel Jones, production designer for Black Cake, which is based on a book. Were you familiar with the book when you joined the show?
Not when I first spoke to the guys, no, but I familiarized myself very quickly, obviously. But I'm always very careful about doing too much research into the book itself if there's variations with the script, because you can take the wrong turn with a slight design hint when you do certain tweaks. So it's good to have it as your basis, but it's very, very important to then kind of leave it behind and go from the script, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, the story spans decades and continents. You're in Jamaica, London, Scotland, Italy, California. I think that's everything. So where do you start when it's so expansive like that? Like, are you how much do you want to shoot location? How much can you afford to shoot location? Like, or can you just do exteriors, and how much is builds?
Oh, well, I always say I'd build everything if I could, so that I could control it. But the greater exteriors, like London itself, for example, you can't replicate London. You have to go and get some of London for real. The same with Italy. We have to get those exteriors, but most of the interiors were builds in the end in a studio in Wales, believe it or not.
Oh, nice. So that was like planned from the start. You would just pick up exteriors where you could.
Yes, there were some things that weren't planned. We did 2 weeks shooting in Jamaica with a certain amount that we were intending on shooting back here, but due to various things, we ended up having to replicate a bit of those locations from Jamaica back and doing a lot more of Jamaica. So we even did a Jamaican beach party in a studio in Wales at one point.
You built a Jamaican beach in Wales.
Yes, inside.
With sand.
With 80 tons of sand, yes.
Oh my God. Where did you get the sand from? Did you order it from Jamaica? Is there
not from Jamaica, no, but
sand?
we did find as close a match color-wise to the sand that we'd seen out in Jamaica. So it was a special source, and then it was a very refined sand as well, of course, because we couldn't just get your normal builder sand, because people are actually going to be in it, acting in it, working in it. So it had to be cleaned and everything. So it was, you learn a lot of different things in this job.
That's crazy. And then you just have to send the sand back afterwards when you're done.
Well, we sold it on actually to various, some to schools and some to equestrian centers.
Mm-hmm. I love when you watch the show or like multiple episodes and Covey travels. I love that you could see not just obviously the changes in the places she's in, but the color palette, because obviously in Jamaica it's a lot brighter, and then it's a little bit more gloomy in London, which I think most people expect, just rain, stereotypical. But then in Scotland, which is really her low point, her story is very dark.
We planned that. Right, one of the very first mood boards that we kind of submitted to the showrunners was, going with those rich palettes of colors, those warmth, especially the idea of those warm memories as well, because we're telling the story as a flashback quite often. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely, we starting off with the warm colors, golden sands, yellows, blues, very rich blues. And then I really wanted to drain that out by the time we got to the UK, and then you go a bit further, like you said, with Scotland, making it really kind of dark, because, just matching the story beats a little bit, really. And then just slowly bringing that color back in for California. Maybe not quite as vibrant and as warm as it was in Jamaica, but definitely heading back towards there, because that's where the family settled and was raised. So we wanted to make it feel like a real warm family home.
Yeah, like her kitchen is blue in there, so there's.
But yeah, and there's that lovely yellow stove in there that we kind of kept, because we had flashbacks to when they moved into the house. So we wanted some beats that we would show as the house was when they moved in, and then as most people do these days, that they'd done a renovation and extended out the back, but they kept some of those elements. So we kept that stove, just moved its position and stuff. There was nice little bits like that we were able to do.
Yeah, because she doesn't, like normally when people move, they have their old stuff, their old furniture, like memorabilia, but she doesn't have that with what she
No, yeah.
went through. So
There was a different start point to even
Yeah.
the memory wall with the photos and everything. The start was the wedding, essentially.
Mhm. So what else did you do like in her contemporary home to try to show her roots there besides like the color?
We were, yeah, there were some bits, but we didn't want to be too obvious either, because as is stated in some of the dialogue, she was very vague about her youth. So there were some vague hints of the Caribbean, but not much. Lots of links to the sea and the water because that's her love. And we got a lot of stuff shipped over from the States actually, just to kind of really give it some authenticity for the interiors of some of the kitchen implements. A lot of the stuff inside the house had come over. In a similar way, we did a lot of stuff for the Jamaica interiors. We brought stuff over with us from after filming in Jamaica for that as well.
Mm-hmm. We also followed the lives of her adult children in the present day. So like their lives and their homes and spaces are very modern, obviously. So how did you want to connect them with what they knew, which wasn't a lot of their mothers or their parents?
No, we didn't connect them that much with their mother's history, but more with that the idea of a relatively successful family that had come along well, had done well. So the kids then set off in a good way in their own way. We definitely wanted to go more that kind of artistic route for Benny. So Benny's apartment was great fun to do and introduce the artwork and that kind of textured interior, which was really nice. And then of course, the work then and the work environment for a brother, just to show the clash of types between them as well, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's an oceanographer, another connection to the ocean. So
yes, yeah, but still, he's very kind of straight and has done the
Mhm.
right thing all through his life, whereas Benny had, kind
Yeah,
of gone on her own way and stuff. So
they were
there's
estranged.
a
Yeah.
definite difference in the two.
Did you create her artwork as well?
We found an artist in LA that we came to an agreement with, where she generated some stuff and allowed us to use some other stuff. So very much of the era that we were talking about. And I think Cal, my set deck, traced her down and kind of did that discussion, which was great, because it meant it was right bang on. It wasn't, and it was really good art as well. It wasn't just made up for the show. It's genuine art from an artist of this era.
Mm-hmm. There's a pretty big set piece, not to give too much away, of a train crash. So what was it like building that?
Well, the whole of that is actually high density foam because we rolled it inside a big steel cage. So that was all the wood effect is all painted onto high density foam so that it was safe to put not just actors but stunt players in there, and we rolled it for real to let them bounce about a bit.
Interesting. How many sets do you think you build for this? Just because you cover so much ground, like literally.
We covered
like,
a lot of ground, a lot more in the
travels.
end. Yeah, a lot more in the end than we thought we were going to in the first instance. But I think it was 40 plus in the end.
Oh wow!
If you counted little, we had to do little things like closets and bedrooms and stuff that just kept popping up. But it was somewhere in the region of 40 plus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which one was your favorite one to build?
Probably Lynn & Covey's house, because we were replicating that exterior, the lovely exterior we did in Jamaica, and we did a complete duplication of the veranda that they had so that we could do a bit of crossover. I always hate to have a set which is just literally the door is the difference between the inside and outside. I always try and overlap so that you can hide where that join is essentially a bit better. So you do a bit here, a bit there. And it helped us out in the end by being able to do a bit more back in the studio than we had intended to.
Interesting. Well, Arwel, it's great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Gavin Bocquet, production designer for Silo. The show is based on the book series, and it has such a specific setting, an underground silo in a dystopian future. So where do you begin with this? Because you have the source material of the books, and obviously with Grammys, the showrunner.
Yeah, I think we began as a threesome really with Morton Tilden, the first director, and Graham Yost and Hugh Howey as well, all discussing the basic look or style. And Hugh was very good in the sense that he understands that the moving image is a very different way of telling stories than the written word. So we had a lot of freedom in what we produced. And we started off on a very sort of soft prep time of about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, where we were just trying to throw different ideas, concepts around for how the silo could look. And one of the early references from everybody was a sort of East European Russian type of 50s, 60s architecture, maybe in concrete, maybe in a very sort of robust material. We did do some concepts that added quite a lot of metal structures and support structures within the silo, but it became very easy to turn it into like a sci-fi spaceship type of look. So we soon went away from that, and we all agreed that this rather robust, sort of heavy concrete architecture would work well in that world. And it would also, with the concrete, give us a lot of opportunity for aging, which was very important in a mile deep silo, to try and give a different idea for what levels you were on, as obviously the lower levels being much wetter and damper and more distressed than the upper levels. So that was our original plan, and that was how we moved forward into this sort of this style that we eventually arrived at.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the gritty utilitarian look. Well, the silo is supposed to be 144 levels. You obviously did not build 144. So how much did you build? And what was it like working with like visual effects to expand the rest of the silo?
Yeah, I think on these type of shows, it's really critical that the visual effects department supervisor, Daniel Rorschberger, came on board really early, because there's always that decision, quite simple question of how much do we build and how much did visual effects build? And there's never a one answer to that. It depends on the scene and the setting and what's required in that sequence. But obviously, having to build maybe 70 plus sets, we knew we didn't really have the budget and the stage space to do all those sets as individual sets complete, certainly on the larger scale ones. So we knew the shaft and the staircase set was going to be one of the critical areas. There's a lot of action in that world, and it was going to determine an awful lot about the personality of the silo. So we didn't have a stage or a studio when I joined, and that was being sort of looked for as an old industrial space. And we did find an old sort of cold storage unit facility that had one space that was about 40 foot high. So we knew we could possibly get 2 levels of balconies within that space. So we had one central staircase that connected from one floor to the next floor. So the directors can continually shoot from one balcony down to the next balcony and around the staircase. But obviously anything wider than that, looking up or looking down or moving through that world, then there'd be a visual effects enhancement. And obviously it was a repeating pattern in many cases. So that obviously made it a little bit, I wouldn't say simpler for visual effects, but having a repeating pattern going down a mile was easier than a set or environment which was changing every 30 or 40 feet. And we ended up only building, I think, 3/4 of the circle of the silo. The other quarter of walls was green screen, where we could quite quickly, obviously in visual effects terms, produce other levels that didn't look like the apartment level that we built. So that was by far the biggest set, and established really what we had to do for the rest of the environments down there, whether industrial, offices, apartments.
Mm-hmm. I love the apartments and like some of the offices we see, because you just really, like you were saying before, you could see the different social classes, right? Like obviously the upper class, you're higher, and then there's like the middle class, and then down below, and like those, in those rooms you could see like the people's personalities, because it's their home, and there's a little bit more color and different layouts. And like Bernard's office is blue and completely clean. So
Yes,
so
yes.
also like designing those spaces for the inhabitants.
Well, obviously any spaces like that offices and living spaces obviously allow us and certainly Amanda Bernstein, the set decorator, to create and help the personalities of the characters, because that's where they spend their time, and with their living apartments, that's where they live. And the challenge is always for us to understand, when the whole show is put together, that the audience will understand these level changes, that because you don't shoot in order, you don't shoot in up, middle, down, it's all sort of rather jumbled up. So it's only when the whole thing is put together, you know whether you've achieved that separation and the audience can start to understand. I mean, it was hard in one way because obviously a lot of the architecture is based on a module system, as it would have been at that time. So there's a similarity throughout the silo, whether you're in the top or the bottom. So we had that challenge in terms of also trying to dress those environments to be on different floors and different levels and have different personalities. But obviously from a budgetary point of view, it did help that the architecture had a similarity all the way through. But as a challenge, we didn't want the audience to think that we were just shooting the same space all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I also like that a lot of like the shapes of like the windows and the doorways and everything were soft. They were round, like there were no hard edges, because it was like they're in a circular silo.
Yeah,
So,
I think whether that's is a sort of simplistic answer, but yes, that is what we decided to do. That everything was based on circles where we could and form. So you had that character running right the way through, and it took away a slight sort of hard edgeness that could have come about if it was all angular. So because it was a pretty sort of hard and earthy environment we were producing. So, but it was where people were living. They've been living there for 300 years. So you had to make it appear as much as you could as though it was a pleasant place to live. Obviously, that's arguable, but within it, sort of in our dressing world and how we finished the sets, we wanted them to feel as though people were comfortable living there.
One of the most striking scenes is when Juliet is in the cornfields. How much of that was real?
Yeah, that was always going to be a challenge, and we knew we had to build a certain amount of the cornfield for the running and the chasing. And the question is, how do you produce the corn? Well, we were using Pawnbrokers, a great greens company in the UK, and we knew they could grow the corn. They could grow a certain amount of corn in the time, and we did start to grow half of the amount of real corn we needed. But then, because of schedule changes, the dates didn't work. So we had to start again. Pawnbrokers had to start again.
Oh no!
For another 4 months of growing corn, and I think we also managed to get every bit of fake corn from the US, every prop house we could find. So we had half real corn and half fake corn, and I can't remember the full square footage, but it probably covered maybe 2 or 3 tennis court sizes.
Oh my God.
And obviously surrounded with green screen for any of the wider shots, because the farming levels were quite large. They went across the full width of the silo in its real world. So it was it was interesting getting the corn right, in the sense of making the real corn look like the fake corn and the real corn actually growing, in the middle of winter in the UK. But as a set, it was quite more of a functional thing we had to do to get it right, to look right and stand upright and feel as though you're in a real cornfield.
So how do you go about doing that, matching the real corn with the fake corn?
Well, we hoped for a lot of luck. But we obviously knew what real corn would grow like, and obviously the fake corn, to be fair to the US fake corn world,
was great fake corn.
Was pretty close. They had obviously spent time. And we did have to do a little bit of painting, a little bit of puffing over certain instances to get it to work. And we put the best corn was obviously close to camera corn, if you put it that way. And the fake corn was a bit further in the distance. So it was one of those sets that is very simple, but takes up quite a lot of your logical time.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, lastly, the show has been renewed for a second season. Has there been any like early discussions about season 2 plans? Like you could totally expand it based on what happened in the finale, what we see in season 2. So
no, sure. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm doing something else.
Oh no.
So I can't tell you. 18 months on one show, maybe enough. And I think a lot of the sets basically are through to season 2 and maybe 3, and that's why budgetary wise for season 1 it was quite not high, but we knew we were amortizing over possibly a second season, the third season, the fourth season. The silo shafts, the apartments, the offices, they were all left standing and being able to rejig. So I'll be as excited to see season 2 as somebody who hasn't been involved. So
that's got to be fun too, when you hand off a project like that and see what, you know, you pass the baton and see what the next person does.
Yeah, I think there's a point where, you know, there's everybody has good ideas. So just after that amount of time to get somebody to bring a little something new to the show, that's not a bad thing, you know, in that way. You know, I've been on films before where I remember once I had about 9 months prep on a show, and it was a medieval show, and it got to the point after 9 months prep that I didn't have another castle in me. You know, I just
you need a break. That's all. So.
Yes, it was almost like you need to get another designer for this, but it all worked out in the end. But I think, you know, once we've established the silo world, and we're very happy with that, it's a brilliant project to work on. But maybe it's time then to go and look for something exciting somewhere else.
Well, Gavin, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. Welcome to our Meet the Experts TV production design panel. Today we are joined by Gavin Bocquet from Silo, Merje Veski from The Bear, Arwel Jones from Black Cake, Suzuki Ingerslev from Based on a True Story, and Grace Yoon from Beef. Thank you all for being here. I think production design is such a cool job because you guys get to create worlds and tell a character's whole life story in a single room sometimes. So what is your favorite part of your job? Suzuki, let's start with you.
I think the most exciting part for me is starting a show and starting to dig in and start doing research and getting everybody on board and figuring out what the look is going to be. I mean, that's when you really get to be creative and you work with your team and you work with the producers and directors. And then after that, you know, it gets a little bit trickier, but that's my favorite part, starting up and doing research.
I mean, I would add that that's the worst and the best, because the first day with a blank piece of paper is sort of, whoa. But then you're right, then it sort of becomes something, a collaboration with the director, with the writers, and then the ideas start to flow. That's when it's really, that's when it gets going.
And I love when you get to like show it to everybody, because, you know, everybody could read that same script that we're all reading and come up with a different, you know, idea of what it is. So getting everybody on that same page is so crucial.
And I think the first 2 or 3, 5 to 6 weeks are always a little nerve-wracking, because you're trying to, unless you've worked with the director before, you're always trying to prove to them what they think you can do. So whatever you're showing, in the end, we're working for the director primarily. So it's always nice when you've worked with the director before and you have that trust, but most often it's usually a new director you're working with.
Yeah, sure. Arwel, how about you?
Yeah, same really. That creative process, especially once you're sitting around the table with a director, DOP, getting the juices flowing, kind of talking about what we'd like to do, what is achievable, what's not, or pushing that envelope to try and achieve something that's not really achievable, which is often the case. But I also, one of my favorite bits about my job, I think, is being able to see behind the scenes of other people's jobs. We're very privileged to be allowed into some spaces that normally people don't get to see. And I think it's always a joy to see behind, like when you peek behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz, as it were.
Merje?
Yeah, I'm here. All the creative part, learning to know about the backstories of the characters and what they like and don't like and what they do, and then based on that, creating their spaces and interiors around them. That's lots of fun. Lots of research, love that. And I also agree, I've been places where most of the people never ever go or have access to, just because what we do. It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Grace, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to add to all of I agree with all of you. I think another component that I really enjoy is when you're on set and actually seeing something that you planned unfolding. Like if it was like a very complicated shot that needs to work within the flow of the set, and that's always a good moment. And then also just on the spot problem solving sometimes when something goes wrong. but then you have built enough trust with your creative collaborators that you can think up something on the fly that could actually work and ends up working better. Like those types of unplanned moments are really thrilling, and yeah, that's what I like.
Yeah, because that's like partly like instinctual too, right? And a little bit of luck, I guess, if it all works out. So
Yeah, it's like you work so you can work and discuss and plan so much, but then like inevitably something may fall apart, and having the discussions within your team and everyone being on the same page, you kind of know how to solve it together, because if there's an instinct that's been formed about like this is the themes of the show, this is what the scene means, this is what should be happening in this shot.
Mhm. I've heard some production designers say they don't necessarily want their work to be so obvious and stand out, in a scene that it's like distracting and it's noticed per se, because they want it to work in the scene and complement it. So I guess like what is the best compliment someone can give you about your work? Like, do you want them to notice it
I got that one.
exactly like that?
The best is, the crew gets to a location and they're like, it was an empty warehouse at one time, and they're like, wasn't this always a warehouse? I mean, a warehouse with like a restaurant in it? And like, no, we actually put some work into this. I can't tell you how many times crews walk in and think it was just the way it was, and that we've done like absolutely nothing.
You just found the place.
We just found it.
No,
I had
Yeah.
on one of my shows, we had a cemetery we had to build somewhere, and we built a house there as well. And one of the writers was, wow, this is amazing. Like, how did you find a cemetery and the house on the same property?
No, I think when the electricians or the riggers compliment your set, you've probably done something right.
Arwel, how about you?
Yeah, I think a very similar thing, when you see people go up and try and touch the walls just to see if it's real or not, or what I quite like as well is when you take your producer or director on the set for the first time when it's finished, fully dressed, and you're talking them through it, but you kind of lose them. They wander off and start playing with the props, or you kind of know that you've nailed it if they start going off into their own world within that space. I think it works then.
If they want to play in the space, so
Yeah, if they feel at home in the space, then I think you've done it well.
Grace, yeah.
I guess when an actor says that they feel like their performance was being supported by the space, like they got to really understand the character by walking into the space and gained ideas for their characters through it.
Merje?
Yeah, I mean, a show is never going to survive just on the way it looks, as much as it's very much part of what we do. You really need the whole show with the characters and the dynamics of the story to work. And if we're a small part of making that work, then that's the biggest compliment, I think. I don't think films or shows ever survive just on their sort of visual looks.
Yeah, like everything has to be clicking and working as one. Yeah, for sure. Merje?
Yeah, I do agree for all of the above. And yeah, the final compliment is when it comes from actors, it's just some of the person who will come and thank you. It's like, yes, I can feel it here. And they can work around it. It's great.
Mm-hmm. I love when I hear from production designers that they put like details or trinkets in like drawers that will never make it on camera, but they think it's so important for the character and like the backstory. And they've created the backstory like in their own mind, even about like talking to the writer or the actor or something. Or sometimes you could put something in a set and like you could lose it in the edit. So, but what are some of your favorite things or details that you've put on a set in any of your projects that have not made it on camera, but you like that it was in there?
Well, that's a huge answer. That's a huge, so many things. But anyway, carry on. Yes.
Now, I was just going to say, based on a true story, the one we're talking about, we thought it was funny that there was a record that was Jailhouse Rock on the turntable. Nobody will ever see that, but we thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm. Gavin, how about you? Have you thought of
No,
one?
nothing really jumps to mind in that, but there's lots of things we do when we look back at shows we finished that you don't end up seeing. I mean, not every, we can't do everything as a wide shot from the corner of the room, and you have to accept that as long as the ambience on the set when you're there is understood by the actors and the director, then that's enough. But you're always going to be a bit disappointed if something you spent a lot of time working out isn't actually ending up on camera, which get a little bit annoyed, but then you soon have to put that away.
You have to kill your darling sometimes. Merje?
For example, the Bear season 2, the Berzata House episode, I made sure that there's so many trinkets and things around that if actors want to touch them or see them, and have enough things in the kitchen for the mother character to play around. We had to stock the refrigerators, all the drawers, because she just goes bananas in there. So, and I think it helped her a lot. I mean, she's a great actress, but like she was able to touch and move and throw things, and it was fun.
Yeah, because you want to be like tactile and yeah. Grace? Yeah.
I think well, I guess on Beef, there was a moment I was on set and they were rehearsing and blocking, and it's when Stephen Yeun's character is sitting at the desk, and it's now his apartment is converted to Chobros. I took like some bills and started tearing them up into tiny little pieces and making them into little balls, like as if it was like a nervous reaction, and just put it on the desk. And then Stephen had come around and started using it in the scene, and I thought like, oh cool, you don't actually see it, but he's actually doing it in the performance. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and you guys didn't even talk about it. You guys never talked about it. He just sat down and picked it up.
Well, he sat down and started picking up and playing with it, and then we had a brief exchange after, and I said, I told him that his rehearsal inspired that I guess balling up or nervous tick, I guess.
Arwel, how about you?
Yeah, no, on a previous show, I did called Inside Man. The lead character that Dave Tennant was playing was very paranoid about being observed. So there's a lot of things that in the room that I turned to be actually looking at him, so that he was being observed by little pottery characters and paintings and stuff. But what you didn't see, there was some wooden ducks out in the garden as well, looking at his window. So I knew they were there, but you never really saw them on camera.
That's all that matters when you know they're there. So yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap, but thank you so much for your time. It was great speaking with all of you, and congratulations on all of your projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah.